Hey everyone, I'm player HOI, the project lead of the Cold War mod. In this video I will talk about some of the reworked and new features that will be available in the upcoming 0.6 alpha update. The first feature which received significant rework is the way you lease territories. Leasing territories is a unique feature to the Cold War mod, and previously it was done with a dedicated state button. Now it has its own diplomatic option. So let's assume that I want to lease some territory from another country. All I need to do is to right-click the country and select the Lease Territory option. Once I do this, the Lease Territory interface will open, showing a list of territories that I can request a lease on and some information about them. For example, their level of infrastructure, whether they have a dockyard and what's the level of the dockyard, whether they have an airbase and what's the level of the airbase, and this is the lease period, the time for which the lease will be valid for. Now, if I want to take a closer look at any of these states, all I need to do is to right-click here and the camera will pan to that state. If I want to request a lease, I will need to select it and choose the lease period and click on Send. Once the request has been sent, if the lease is granted, I will receive a notification about it, and I can always click on the state and see some information about the lease. So first of all, I will see when this lease will expire. I can see here who is leasing this territory to who. Please note that leasing territories will cost you civilian factories. In the case of this lease, it cost me 5 civilian factories. But if I want to give up on a lease to get some factories back, I can always do that by clicking on the state and then clicking on the Revoke/Cancel Lease button. The next feature, which received significant rework as well, is the ability to request monopolies from other countries. Monopolies can only be requested from non-communist countries and will give the country who granted the monopoly potential for some very beneficial effects, both when the monopoly expires and while it is active. So let's take into example Colombia. Now I can request a monopoly from Colombia by right-clicking and selecting the Request Monopoly option. And just as with the Lease Territory diplomatic action, I will get a list of states that I can request a monopoly in. On top of that, I will also have some information about the resources that this state contains. So we can see here that this state has 19 units of oil, which is very good because I do need a little bit more oil for my armies. So all I need to do is to select the state and choose the monopoly period in years. Let's go for a 5-year monopoly. Another thing that I can choose is to make this monopoly binding. As a rule, most monopolies can be revoked at any time, but binding monopolies can only be revoked once the monopoly contract expires. So once I've selected everything that I need, I can click on Send, and if the monopoly is granted, I will be notified about that as well. If you click on the state that has the monopoly, you will see that here there's the American flag showing that American companies have access to resources in the state. This is the period of the monopoly, and these are the effects that the country may experience once the monopoly expires. Now please note that it's usually a very good idea to keep high relations with countries you have monopolies in, because while they will enjoy the effects of having a monopoly in their territory, these things are not very popular with the population, so the government may decide to nationalize all foreign assets in the country in case your relations are low. If that happens, your country will lose all monopolies in the country that nationalized the foreign assets, and you will not be able to request a new monopoly for a long period of time. The country who nationalized all foreign companies will receive some civilian factories to represent the assets that were nationalized. It is possible to stop the nationalization process, but I will leave it up to you to discover exactly how that can be done when you play the mod. The third and most significant rework, which due to its extent may as well be a new feature, is the ability to request sanctions on other countries. Sanctions are imposed on countries by the UN Security Council and are the most powerful tool that the Security Council has in enforcing its policies on countries and keeping in check countries who act in aggressive ways. The AI will use sanctions to limit the power of unruly countries, but where this feature is most usable is in multiplayer games, where a specific human player can be put in line by either the threat of sanctions or by specific sanctions targeted against his military, industry, and armed forces. So let's take a look at an example we have at the beginning of the game, where we have the Democratic Army of Greece, a communist uprising fighting the civil war in Greece. Now, if I want to impose sanctions on the Democratic Army of Greece, all I need to do is to right-click the country and click on the Demand Sanctions Diplomatic Action. This will bring up the sanctions interface, allowing me to first of all choose the type of sanctions I want to impose. Each of these types will have different effects on the country, and each of these types also has its own level. So it's possible to have, for example, level 5 economic sanctions, while at the same time having level 10 military sanctions. So in order to request sanctions, I will need to choose the type of sanctions by clicking here. I will have a short summary here of what these sanctions will do, and in here I will need to pick the duration of sanctions. Now, the longer the duration of sanctions is, the longer it will take until I can call for new sanctions against this country again, which means that if I were to request sanctions for 1 year, I will not be able to request sanctions in another 3 years. Now, this is the standard rule, but if the country continues to act very aggressively and the Security Council finds reason to sanction that country again, this cooldown period will be removed and you will be able to sanction that country again. This is all meant to deter countries from acting too aggressively and expanding too fast. So let's go ahead and ask for military sanctions for 5 years and just click on Send. This will trigger a resolution on the Security Council. Once the resolution is adopted, everyone will be notified that sanctions have now been imposed against that country. And in order to see what are the effects of the current sanctions against this country, you can just right-click. You will see this icon here, and it will tell you what are the effects of sanctions that are currently imposed on this country. So that is all for sanctions. It's quite exciting to see how this will develop in multiplayer games that people will play with each other and how far people can go with these sanctions. Of course, this is one of those features that uses the AI, so a lot of tweaking will be needed to make sure that the AI uses this feature properly. And with regards to the player, some adjustments may be needed in order to make this feature fair and more balanced, and these things will happen as development continues. Another small quality of life feature that will be coming in the 0.6 update is the ability to view embargoes. You will now be able to see embargoes that a country has initiated against other countries, as well as embargoes that have been placed on that country. So if I were to click on Spain, for example, and click here, I will see all countries that Spain has embargoed. And if I were to click here, I can see all countries that have embargoed Spain. And one last thing, of course, with the 0.6 update, China will receive its 1950s focus tree, which will be unlocked in case China wins the civil war. So these are the main changes that are coming with the 0.6 update, alongside various bug fixes and changes that have been done thanks to you guys reporting bugs via the dedicated bug report form that I have created. Thank you very much for those, and please keep them coming. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video on the Iron Workshop. Bye bye.